We are back. It is the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. That could only mean one thing. It's the money stop. He's Cole Cusumano. I'm Steven Cusumano. And listen, we've been doing this show for, four seasons now? 2020, 21, 22, 23, 5 seasons now. And I think of all 5 seasons, Cole, we just had our most successful race in terms of betting, props, you name it. I mean, we absolutely nailed everything. That would be impressive in any case. But this was at Talladega. We had an unbelievable success rate at the most unpredictable track in the sport. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., one of my value picks for the win, won this race. And Cole, again, this is a track that historically is extremely difficult to forecast, but we had it down to a T. And I think that, you listen to these super speedway episodes knowing that there's a lot of vibes, there's a kind of minimal numbers and trends going in. But this is just a testament to the fact that at these super speedways, you got to tell the money stop, because you could be a whole lot richer right now if you were listening to last week's show.
Oh yeah, this was a money stop masterclass in every sense of the word. I don't want to get too deep into this because, as you just mentioned there, stats are typically pretty obsolete for Talladega and drafting tracks. But man, looking at what we had here in this top 10 and the drivers we highlighted from that show, we got to talk a little bit about it, because we not only did we have 7 of the top 10 drivers at a drafting track, we correctly highlighted the top 3 finishers, including, as you mentioned, Stenhouse, your winner, one of your value picks, the runner-up finisher in Brad Keselowski, and my winner pick, my gut call, in William Byron. And why that's important to note is because when talking strategies for betting at drafting tracks, we always say when you're making those gut calls, when you're picking your winners, to put some money down as an insurance policy on a top 3 finisher, a top 5 finisher prop. As an example, we said we saw 2 photo finishes previously this season, and if we saw another 3-wide photo finish, which we did indeed get, and you didn't put an insurance policy down on one of your favorites for the win, you're going to be really upset if you only put a race winner bet down. And in my case, in picking William Byron as a winner, he lost this race by 27 hundredths of a second. If you picked Brad Keselowski, he missed out by 6 thousandths of a second. So while Talladega and these drafting tracks are all about luck, there is a way to kind of have a strategy going into these things and make some money, optimize the values that the odds makers have presented for you in weeks like that. But looking at the remaining top 10, the 4 drivers that we highlighted on our show, we had Eric Jones in the 5th spot. So not only did we have the top 3 drivers provided for you from Talladega in our show, but we had 4 of the top 5 finishers at Talladega. That is just insane to even comprehend. And then rolling through the rest here, we had Christopher Bell in 6th, Austin Dillon in 8th, and Bubba Wallace in 9th. So I think looking at the drivers that we had in this top 10 and the drivers that we specifically talked about, it more or less speaks to our intuition, because, I mean, the top 3, those are all very well-versed speedway racers, but, I mean, Bell, Austin Dillon, Eric Jones, that was all vibes and intuition. And I think what makes this top 10 even more impressive for us from a betting sense is that there was a record-setting 28-car pileup towards the end of this thing. So, I mean, it would be impressive enough to have half the top 10 at a track like Talladega, but to have 7 of the top 10 drivers highlighted at a drafting track with a record-setting caution for 28 cars, I mean, yes, there's luck involved, obviously, but we have been making these shows, doing the research, and making these calls with conviction, and you're seeing it pay off literally for bettors every single week since the playoffs have began. Not only did we have a successful week at Talladega, but going back since the playoffs began 5 weeks ago, we have successfully highlighted 4 of the 5 winners so far. That includes 2 spoiler winners, and we've been nailing our prop bets, our DFS analysis. So the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day, we are definitely living up to our slogan.
It's pretty funny, too, because even before that 28-car pileup, we had several other drivers that were the guy to beat in that race, whether it was Joey Logano, Austin Cindric, a couple of the guys I really liked. I mean, they were running right up front before the big one ensued. And, it's funny also, but it's ironic, I guess I should say, because we always say throughout the years, like, these drivers and teams, obviously, if you want to win a championship, you got to bring your A game for the playoffs. And what's ironic is that, I mean, our best predictions and our best analysis of the season has come in the playoffs. So we've brought our A game for the playoffs, and that does not change with the Roval. I usually mention like all the drivers we had out of the top 10, but this week I'm just going to mention the 3 drivers that were not in the top that were in the top 10 that we did not mention last week. And what's really, really funny, I think you can argue two of the best drivers in the sport all year are two of the drivers we didn't mention last week. Kyle Larson finished 4th, and Denny Hamlin finished 10th. Who would have thought that those are two of the only guys in the top 10 that we didn't select, and they end up being the outliers for us? And I want to give a disclaimer, too, because the guy that finished 7th, Justin Haley, while I didn't name him as a value pick, I started my little value picks monologue by saying that I wanted to give him an honorable mention. So he was kind of the 13th man, if you will. So you could basically say we got 7.5 out of these 10 drivers. It's unbelievable. On to the next one, though. It's great to revel in the success. Hopefully you were a part of it. But as we look ahead to the Roval, Cole, an elimination race, a lot on the line for a lot of different people in the playoffs. And as we check out the pre-qualifying odds per DraftKings, it'll start with Shane Van Gisbergen. He's the race winner favorite at plus 400. AJ Allmendinger's plus 750. Kyle Larson is plus 800. And then you've got a three-way tie for the fourth highest odds in William Byron, Tyler Reddick, and Christopher Bell at plus 1,000. So you've got a couple of road course ringers, and then you've got a couple of Hendrick Chevys. And really, from that point on, after the road course ringers and SVG and AJ Allmendinger, it's a bunch of basically championship favorites, guys that you think are going to have to step it up as we enter the round of 8.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for providing the DraftKings race winner odds to lead us off, because for our outline, I've actually provided the BetMGM race winner odds, and they do vary. And we do like to offer a reminder for our listeners every now and then to don't restrict yourself to one app. Be sure to look at all of them, because the odds for any prop bet, whether it be a top 5 finisher, match bets, you name it, they do vary. And there could be an app where Christopher Bell is plus 1,000 for the race win, and there could be an app where Christopher Bell is plus 1,100 for the race win. So you want to maximize your value, maximize your payout for the driver that you think is going to win this race, or the driver you think is going to have a pretty quality day. And with that in mind, the top 5 shortest odds to win this race are relatively the same from app to app. You're seeing your road course ringers in SVG, AJ Allmendinger, a lot of the Hendrick Chevys and Kyle Larson, William Byron, Chase Elliott. And yeah, as you mentioned, obviously the championship favorites, the playoff contenders with their backs against the wall. So for me, when I think about favorites for the Roval, I'm looking at two guys that I was very confident in last week, two guys that had very quality days at Talladega and that were able to capitalize on others' misfortune, navigate the madness, and able to keep some momentum going into an elimination race. And that begins with Christopher Bell, our 6th place finisher from last week, who per BetMGM is valued at plus 1,100 for the race win, and a steep $21.9 million in daily fantasy per Grid Rival. That is the most expensive in the field. He remains red hot, finishing 7th or better in 6 of his last 7 starts now, with 3 straight top 10s and a 6th place average in that span, with the lowest finish of 14th through those 7 races. So I think you look at the field of 12 right now for the playoffs, you look at the entire field in general in the Cup Series, there is no hotter driver in the sport than Christopher Bell. We say it on a weekly basis, on an annual basis at this point now, it seems like. When the playoffs roll around, you need to have your eye on Christopher Bell. I think you mentioned it a few weeks back. We expect this driver to win not just one, but multiple races in the postseason. And I think that very well could begin with the Roval, because you look at his stats from here. He won the very first next-gen race at the Charlotte road course. He has another top 10 there back in 2021. And although he finished 15th there last year, he did start second. He led some laps and finished top 5 in both stages. So he's been really quick at the Roval. He has been one of the best drivers in the next gen on road courses. He's been one of the most underrated drivers on road courses in his Cup career. And you look at his stats from this season alone. I mean, he finished runner-up at COTA, had top 10 with laps led at Sonoma. He had laps led late at Chicago with a shot at the win. And he's also a 2-time road course winner in the Cup Series, beginning with his first ever win in Cup at the Daytona road course. So I think Christopher Bell, it goes without saying that he is one of the best drivers in the sport, period, but especially right now. And I love him for this win with momentum on his side for the Roval. My next favorite had an excellent showing at Talladega, and that is going to be my winner pick from last week, William Byron, at plus 1,000 for the race win and $18.9 million in daily fantasy. That is the 4th most expensive. He is coming off a podium finish at Talladega, and he is playing with house money officially because he is the only driver in that round of 12 to lock himself into the round of 8, the semifinal round before the championship 4. And I think when we think of William Byron, previously to the next gen, we did not think of him as a renowned road course racer, but he has quickly established himself as one of the best drivers on these style tracks in the next gen. He is a 2-time winner in that regard. That includes COTA this year. And although he has yet to win at the Roval, I reflect back to 2019, his second race here at the Roval. This is where I remember we saw his road course racing program really improve and come to life. Started from the pole in that race, finished 6th. From there to current day, he's had 5 more starts with the lowest finish of 16th, a career best runner-up coming last year, and more than 23 laps led in half of his 6 starts at the Roval. So I think in the next gen, William Byron is somebody who has asserted himself as one of the best drivers on these style tracks. He has consistently executed at the Roval, and I think what we're seeing now from this team, I mentioned it last week, they are finally getting their bearings back together. We're seeing an immense amount of chemistry between him and the team. Rudy Fugle has continued to call an excellent race. Last week at Talladega alone, this is a team where going into the postseason, they put a heavy emphasis on stage racing. They did not get many points built up in the regular season beyond those 3 wins early on, and we saw it last week. He finished top 5 in both stages. He finished 3rd, and I think we're going to see it again this weekend where he's running up front, contending for that win once again, and I think he has a very good shot at getting his first win at his home track this weekend.
I'm going to start with my favorite as another guy in a very similar vein to William Byron, and that's Tyler Reddick, because you mentioned Willie B, one of the best road course racers in the next-gen era, right up there with Tyler Reddick, who's a guy that, well, let's start with the case against him. First of all, he is rightfully so plus 1,000 for the race win on BetMGM, and on Grid Rival Daily Fantasy, he is $17.7 million, which is the 10th most expensive driver, but look at where he's at in the standings. He is plus 14 to the good, which is the 7th out of 12 drivers in the playoffs right now. It could be better, but it definitely could be a lot worse. I think you're going to see he and Chase Elliott, who's 13 points to the good in 8th, both try to rack up as many stage points as they possibly can. But continuing with the case against Tyler Reddick, he was one of the hottest drivers in the sport entering the playoffs, and somehow, some way, even though he's got 4 straight finishes outside of the top 20, Tyler Reddick is still within the playoff cutoff. So if there's any race for him to get back on track and back into the form that he was at the start of the playoffs, it would be this week, because along with William Byron, here's the case to be made, there hasn't really been any drivers with better success in the next-gen car at road course races. He is a 3-time race winner at road courses in the next-gen, albeit not in 2024, and he's had top 10s at 3 of the 4 road course races this year, including a runner-up at Chicago, which he almost won, and a 5th place at COTA. So a couple of top 5s, 3 top 10s. At the Roval specifically, he has a 7th place average finish, which is the 2nd best among active drivers, and he finished 2nd here in 2021. The lowest finish he has here came in his first start at the Roval, which was 12th, and he's had over 20 laps led at this track in the last 2 races there. So for Tyler Reddick, yes, there's a case to be made against him. He is ice cold entering this week. The case to be made for him, when he's red hot, he is one of the best drivers in the sport, and he's been the best driver in the sport in the next gen at road courses, and he's been one of the most consistent at the Roval. So I like Tyler Reddick a lot this week. That's why he's a favorite for Vegas. That's why he's a favorite for us. So we just named 3 guys that are near the top of, I guess, the championship contending front runner list. I'm going to move to one that is obviously not, because AJ Allmendinger is not even in the playoffs. Plus 800, though, very solid value, as he's one of the favorites in Vegas this week. He's not available on Grid Rival this week. Neither is SVG, but listen, he's made a living off this his entire career. The Dinger is a renowned road course ringer. All 3 of his Cup Series wins have come on road courses. He's finished 6th in 2 out of 4 road course starts this season. However, he has had DNFs in the other 2, so there's maybe a little bit of volatility and a case to be made against him as well in this sense. However, if you're looking at the best road courses for the road course ringer Dinger, he has been the king at the Roval. Look at the Xfinity Series numbers. He's 4-0. You don't go undefeated in NASCAR, but that's what he is. He's undefeated in the Xfinity Series. 4 wins, 0 losses, which means 2nd or worst. And he won the Cup race here last year, 2023. He is the best of the best at this track. 3 top 10s in the Cup Series at the Roval, which includes 4 starts in which he has led 75 laps. The only finish he had that was outside the top 10 was due to an engine issue. So, I mean, for the Dinger, you know what you're getting with him. You're getting a great road course racer. You're getting the best guy at the Roval, irregardless of whether it's an Xfinity car or a Cup car. There's a reason he's plus 800 for the race win on BetMGM. And listen, I think once these cars hit the track, we see them practice, we see them qualify, the odds are going to move a little bit. If A.J. Allmendinger comes out, has a really strong practice, a really strong qualifying session, I don't think it's out of the question that Vegas will start to favor him over SVG, depending on how those same trials go for Shane Van Gisbergen. So I think the Dinger is a guy that, for me personally, I'm looking to lock him in before the cars hit the track. Now, this can go the opposite direction. He could come out and not have speed, and then maybe you get him at a value at plus 1,000. But, I mean, look at him last week. I was very pleasantly surprised at the speed that 13 car and A.J. Allmendinger had at Talladega. That was one guy that, we talked about all of our success last week at Talladega. When I was looking at that top 10 with about 5-10 laps to go, A.J. Allmendinger was the one guy I was looking at in the top 10 that I was like, I didn't see this coming at all. And if he's coming over with that kind of speed to begin with, I mean, it's going to mean good things for this week at the Roval. So that's our 4 favorites: Christopher Bell, William Byron, A.J. Allmendinger, and Tyler Reddick. Let's move on to the sleepers category, Cole, which, over this playoff set of the first 5 races here, we've had a lot of success with our sleepers and our value picks, and that's where we've seen a lot of the winners come during the postseason here.
First off, those numbers by A.J. Allmendinger are just downright sickening for the Roval, whether you're talking Cup or Xfinity. And while it's tough to top that kind of success at this track, there have been 2 full-time drivers, 2 playoff drivers actually, that have rivaled those stats from a consistency sense. And I'm going to kick this off with our perennial sleeper over the past 5 weeks in Alex Bowman at plus 1,800 for the race win, and tied with teammate William Byron at $18.9 million in daily fantasy. Alex Bowman is coming off an admirable 16th place finish at Talladega. And why I say admirable is because I mentioned that 28-car pileup at the end. There were only 4 drivers in the playoffs to escape from that unscathed. And while Bowman wasn't involved, he was the 5th best car in this race. He actually finished this one in 16th, and as a result, he is plus 26 entering the Roval. And in terms of results, there is arguably nobody better as a full-time driver at the Roval than Alex Bowman, since it was added to the circuit in 2018, because he is the only driver with top 10s in all 5 of his starts. Now, he did miss one due to injury, but either way, that's still top 10 in 5 starts out of 5 starts at a very difficult track. And as a result, he leads the series in best average finish at 6.4, and that is backed by a runner-up finish in 2019 with a lowest finish of 10th and 8th place finish last year. So, in my opinion, Alex Bowman has been money in the bank the entire postseason. I would argue even more so going into this elimination race, and there is no reason why he should not be a lock for any positional prop bets, specifically a top 10 prop bet, but I would heavily consider him for the race win at plus 1,800 and even a top 5 finisher prop in this one. Next up, we have a former 2-time champion in danger of being eliminated in this cutoff race, sitting 13 points below the cutoff, and that is going to be Joey Logano at plus 3,500 for the race win and a very enticing $15.5 million in daily fantasy. And the thing with Logano is he has failed to place above 14th since his win in the playoff opener at Atlanta, but he's been fast. He's led laps in 4 of 5 playoff races, including last weekend at Talladega, where he was one of the best cars before getting cleaned out in a wreck. But you look at his stats at the Roval, he has been insanely underrated here, and that is evidenced by his plus 3,500 odds for the race win. But Logano is the only other driver, in addition to Alex Bowman, that has top 10s in 5 starts at the Roval. While he has yet to win here, he has a career-best runner-up finish like Alex Bowman, and his next best finish was 5th place, actually coming last year. And as a result, he has the 4th best average finish in the series at 8.7, only brought down by an outlier 18th place finish in the first next-gen race at the Roval, where he started from the pole and led over 25 laps. So I think while he's been very underrated at the Roval, and he's been a very underrated driver in the playoffs, I will not be overlooking Logano this weekend with his back against the wall, entering an elimination race. We know that pressure builds diamonds, and pressure has built 2 championships for Joey Logano. I love him this weekend as a top 10 finisher prop, and for someone that's going to be a heavy contender for a quality day. I don't know if I'm ready to bet him for the race win, but I think he's definitely going to be someone to look out for a top 5 finisher prop, and definitely lock him in for a top 10 finisher prop for the Roval.
Keeping it in the playoff family, I'm going to name 2 playoff drivers, and in a very similar predicament to that of Tyler Reddick, who I just mentioned. And that's the 2 drivers sandwiching him in the points. And that's, I'll start with Chase Elliott, plus 1,300 for the race win. So Vegas likes him a lot. So does Grid Rival. He's at $19.5 million, which is the second most expensive driver. And he had one of the worst possible case scenarios. He finished 29th at Talladega, while a lot of other playoff drivers surpassed him. And that's why he is currently on the cutoff at 8th place, plus 13 to the good. So I think similar situation to Reddick. He's going to try and accrue a lot of stage points, even if that comes at the expense of potentially winning this race. So that's my reservation with Chase. The other part of it is, you always think of Chase Elliott as the best road course racer in the sport. Well, he's had 7 road course wins, but none of them have come in the next-gen car. So keep that in mind. That's something that obviously we've adapted to and adjusted to over our few years doing the money stop here. But at the Roval, Chase Elliott is the only multi-race winner in the field when he went back-to-back in 2019 and 2020, right before the next-gen era. He's had top 10s in 4 out of 6 starts here, including a 9th-place finish last year, and he's led laps over his last 5 Roval starts, which is the most in the series overall with 109 laps led. An 8.2 average finish is the 3rd best in the sport at this course. So for Chase Elliott, you're looking at a guy that needs to have a good run, has to have a points day, doesn't have a next-gen win at the road courses, but it's not because he's ran poorly. He's been a top 5 car. He's been a top 10 car at every road course we've been to for the most part. And you got to think the floodgates, I don't want to call them floodgates, but you got to think he's very due for a road course win. And it's a guy that knows how to perform this time of year, a team that knows how to perform this time of year, and he knows how to rise to the occasion in a cutoff race and win his way into the next round. So he's done it before. He can do it again. There's a reason he is plus 1,300 for the race win. Chase Elliott will run up front this week. I have zero doubt. I think he'll spend the entire day inside the top 10 and likely finish in the top 5. So as he is getting a lot of clout with Vegas, with both BetMGM and with DraftKings, I'm going to give you a driver that not only is a sleeper for the race win, he's a fantastic value this week on both BetMGM and DraftKings, and that is the defending Cup Series champion, Ryan Blaney, who had the worst possible case scenario. He finished second to last at Talladega. That is 39th of 40 drivers. And even still, he is 25 points to the good. 6th out of 12 playoff drivers in the standings. You're going to see him want to accrue a lot of stage points as well. Here's what's criminal. He's plus 5,000 for the race win on BetMGM. He's plus 4,000 for the race win on DraftKings. He is valued at $17.2 million on Grid Rival, which is daily fantasy, and that is kind of right in the middle of the pack, but it's still higher than DraftKings and BetMGM. I can't make out why Ryan Blaney is such a long shot for the odds makers this week, because he was the winner of the inaugural race at the Roval. Obviously, that was 6 years ago in 2018, but even withstanding that, after that, he went on to score 4 straight top 10s at this track, and entering this week, he has a 10.2 average finish at the Roval, which is the 5th best among the active drivers in the sport, and he's led laps in 4 out of 6 starts here. The unfortunate part is that he is yet to finish top 10 in the next gen at the Roval with the best finish of 12th, which came in this race a year ago. So I feel like every driver I've mentioned, there's both a glass half full and a glass half empty sort of outlook. That is certainly it for Ryan Blaney, but I think that the pros significantly outweigh the cons for him. You can say the same about Chase Elliott, but Ryan Blaney, as he is the last of our 4 sleeper drivers, I just feel like he's such a good transition into our value picks, because at plus 5,000 for the win, that is an excellent value. And even on DraftKings, you want him at plus 500 for a top 5 finish. Count me in. I think Ryan Blaney, in terms of the fact that he's coming off a really bad result, which is obviously due to Lady Luck, and the fact that he's 25 points above the cutoff, you're going to look for a strong race, strong run, strong finish out of Ryan Blaney. What about your value picks, Cole?
Value picks, very important segment here, because last week at Talladega, we had 3 of our 4 value picks finish inside the top 10, including 2 in the top 5. And when constructing your DFS lineups for the Roval, I did it before the show. It is going to be very, very difficult to craft one with, a lot of heavy hitters, even some middle of the pack drivers, because it is so top heavy in terms of value. So with that in mind, we have 4 drivers here who I think have a great shot at quality days. Beginning with one name you might not expect to hear on this segment, and that's going to be Ryan Preece at $15 million in DFS. In his sole next-gen Roval start, which was last year, he finished 11th. And I also want to bring up the fact that he finished top 10 in his last road course start this season at Watkins Glen. And get this, in between Daytona and Talladega these past few weeks, so the 5 starts in between, he has a finish of 18th or better with 2 top 10s and a 12.4 average finish. So Ryan Preece, someone who has had a very rough go at SHR, but in the final few races of their existence at SHR in that organization, he is on the most successful stretch of his career, much like us here at the Money Stop. So I would say that Ryan Preece is a very undervalued and underrated driver for this weekend, and one that could very well be a lineup winner for you this weekend at the Roval. Next up is a name that we could not leave off of our final road course race this year, being that he is a road course racing specialist in Michael McDowell. And given his prowess on these style of tracks, I will provide his race winner odds at plus 1,800. And he is actually our cheapest driver in the value pick section at $12 million. So he is going to be what I would call most likely a lineup lock, but there are some things going against him for this race. But first off, some pros. This is his last chance, I think, at a win in his final season with Front Row Motorsports. So with that in mind, there should be a lot of motivation going for this 34 team. He's also a winner in the next gen on a road course last year back at Indy. And as far as this year is concerned, he has finished top 10 in 3 of 4 road course starts with a second place finish at Sonoma and a 5th place finish at Chicago. However, you look at his Roval stats in the next gen, he has a finish of 27th and 32nd, and he has a best finish overall of 12th. So this has been an anomalous track for him in regards to road course racing in the Cup Series. But I think with a lot on the line in his final 5 races with this team, it should be one that Michael McDowell is primed to execute in for a quality day at the Roval.
I couldn't agree more. I think that they've had this date circled on the calendar for a long, long time. I'm going to keep my value picks pretty short and sweet here. I'll go with the guy that finished top 10 last week, and he's been a borderline top 10 driver at the Roval recently, and that's Austin Dillon, who was one of our value picks last week. Value pick for a second straight week, $12.9 million in Grid Rival. That is the 26th most expensive driver, so he's a very viable pick in daily fantasy on Grid Rival. 12th place average finish in the next gen at the Roval. That is a 10th place finish 2 years ago and a 14th place finish last year. He has had 3 straight top 15 finishes at the Roval. That's the case to be made for Austin Dillon. I think that it's there's not a ton of numbers to back it up, but there are certainly 3 straight finishes that reflect this is a track he has a good bearing on. And I'll keep it in the Austin family. Austin Dillon for the value. Austin Cindric for my other value. Austin Cindric is fighting for his playoff life right now. Plus 3,500 for the race win. And as you pointed out with Michael McDowell, I wouldn't bring that up if we didn't think he has a legitimate shot at the race win. $14.7 million in daily fantasy per Grid Rival. That is the 21st most expensive driver, which is a value I like quite a bit. This is a do-or-die race. He is minus 29 points from the playoff cutoff line, which means it's virtually impossible for him to get past the 8th place cutoff. He is 11th out of 12 drivers, which means that even if Austin Cindric has the best stage points day of his life, he still has to jump Daniel Suarez and Joey Logano and Chase Elliott or one of the drivers above him to make it on points. So essentially, he's got to go out there and win this race. They're going to go for broke to win this race. He finished top 10 in our most recent road course, which was Watkins Glen. He's made a really good living on the road courses since debuting in the Cup Series. He does have a lowest finish of 22nd on the road courses, which leads you to think that there's going to be a high floor here. And over 4 road courses this season, he's had a 16.3 average finish over 4 starts. At the Roval, here's the case against him, a best finish of 21st in 2 starts. So really for Austin Cindric, the biggest pro among all of this is that he's got to win. And he has answered the bell. Like, this is a guy that I don't think a lot of people thought would make it out of the round of 16. And you know that after the strong start he had in that round of 16, he wants to finish it off and get to the round of 8 and prove to be an outlier as much as anybody. And I think that when it gets down to it, if this is a race that comes down to strategy, you're going to see that 2 team do some things that, are outside the box. And it's a team that maybe it's baked into the $14.7 million price range on Grid Rival, which, again, 21st among all the drivers you can select in your lineup. So there's a little bit of risk involved. But with risk comes reward. And for Austin Cindric, plus 3,500 for the race win, really, really solid. I think that you're looking for him to win his way in. And we've seen it time and time again in these playoffs. 5 races, we've seen several spoilers already. We saw one last week in Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who was my value pick. He was the last driver out of 12 I mentioned last week. Austin Cindric is the 12th driver out of 12 we mentioned this week. So with that being said, Cole, let's give people a little bit more of a zeroed-in idea of who we have our eyes on at the Roval. We'll each pick one driver per tier.
Well, let me say first, I have all the confidence in the world, even with guys like SVG and the Dinger racing this weekend, that the winner is going to be either Christopher Bell or William Byron this weekend. I think William Byron playing with house money is an excellent choice, but I really like what I've seen from Christopher Bell, and I think it's only a matter of time before he finds victory lane once again this season. He is red hot, got those 7 straight races of finishes of 6th or better, and for that reason, I have to go with him for the race win this weekend at a place he's already won at before in the next gen. As a sleeper, I'm going to go with Alex Bowman. He has proven to be the most reliable sleeper in the postseason. He has incredible stats at this track with top 10s in every single start he's made here. And then for a value pick, let's go with Michael McDowell in what I deem as his final chance at getting a win with FRM before going to Spire.
Favorites-wise, I will take Tyler Reddick out of the favorites category. Just, a guy that had it at the road courses. He needs a good run. I like AJ a lot, Allmendinger, but there's a little bit more of uncertainty baked in with him. So I'll take Tyler Reddick as my favorite. I will take Chase Elliott as my sleeper for the week, and I will take Austin Cindric as my value pick. So I'm riding with all playoff drivers. That being said, Cole, let's talk some big money bets because, we talked about our success at Talladega last week and the fact that the big money bets there were basically insurance bets. And, well, hopefully you were placing some insurance because let's put the fans in your shoes for perspective. You thought William Byron was going to win. The classic example I always bring up for super speedways is if he doesn't win, but he loses in a 3-wide finish, you're going to want to be making sure you had that top 3 prop bet, and you did. So if you were listening last week and you were, preparing for that scenario, well, it was because you listened to our big money bets. So it's going to be a little bit more straightforward this week. Top 5s, top 10s, that's what we're talking about here. Give me your favorite big money bets this week.
Big money bets. I've got a pair of top 5 finisher props and a pair of top 10 finisher props from 4 drivers who I feel are the safest bets to hit this specific number in the results column. And I'm going to kick it off with my top 5 finishers, both valued at plus 135, and that's going to be William Byron and Christopher Bell. I don't think I have to say much else on those 2 drivers. I'm very confident in them. I'm doubling down from last week. Both have momentum. Both have great stats at the Roval and on road courses in their respective careers. So I love both those drivers to get top 5s this weekend at plus 135. And for the top 10 finisher props, I've got the 2 drivers that have finished top 10 in 5 starts here. Alex Bowman, top 5 every start at this track once again. He is actually below even at minus 110. And I don't typically advocate for those specific payouts, but I think that is just guaranteed money right there. So I'm going to definitely put that one down as a big money bet. Alex Bowman, top 10, minus 110. And then Joe Logano, top 10 at even at plus 100. Again, for someone who has top 10s in 5 starts here out of 6, he is definitely one that I'm looking at as a lock as well for a top 10 in this race at the Roval.
I like the direction you took with those because you went based off of the trends, guys that have finished in the top 10 X amount of times out of their 6 starts there, because I took a completely different look at this. I like to base a lot of my predictions and a lot of my kind of intuition off where are we now? Where are we in the point standings? What kind of run do I need to have? And I'm looking at drivers that are on that bubble, a lot of whom that we've mentioned. Blaney, Reddick, Elliott, Logano, 6th to 9th in the standings. They got to have good points days. I'm looking at top 5s and top 10s for all those drivers I just mentioned. Tyler Reddick, plus 135 for a top 5. Chase Elliott, plus 160 for a top 5. Ryan Blaney's plus 500 for a top 5. And then I'll move to top 10s. Joey Logano, plus 100, which is even money. I like your pick of Alex Bowman as well at minus 110, seeing as he is comfortable but not locked in the same case as Ryan Blaney, who's plus 150 for a top 10. So I like the fact that you went with drivers based on prior success at the Roval, because I'm going strictly off, not necessarily strictly, but I'm going a little bit off the trends we've seen at the Roval, but weighing very heavily on points racing. This is what you got to do in the playoffs. This is what you got to do to make the round of 8. If you're on that bubble, if you're 20, 15, 25 points to the good, or even in the case of Joey Logano, 13 points out, you got a points race. You got to finish top 5, top 10, and I think that those are the bets I'm looking at. Joey Logano, Alex Bowman, Ryan Blaney for top 10s, and then in terms of top 5s, I'm looking at Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, and maybe even Ryan Blaney at plus 500.
Not to be a dead horse here, but I'm going to go with the 4 drivers I just mentioned for big money bets because I feel very confident in those 4 drivers this weekend and the fact that they're going to have really quality days at the Roval. For their positional props to finish better than where they are ranked because they're really good values here. Both Christopher Bell and William Byron are at 8.5, so to finish 8th or better, I love Bell and Byron for that prop. And then I have Joey Logano better than 12.5, so 12th or better for Joey Logano. And Alex Bowman better than 11.5, so a top 11 for Alex Bowman. For someone who's finished top 10 in every start of his career here, that is also a no-brainer. Seeing my confidence in those 4 drivers I just named, if you go full throttle, $20, you get $200 back. If you throw on the safety car insurance feature, you get $100 back if you hit all 4 legs. And if you miss one of those legs, you get $30 back, so a $10 net gain from that. Again, those 4 drivers specifically, I like a lot this weekend. I'm not going to speak much else on them and their resumes at the Roval or the next gen on the road courses, but to kind of defer and give you some, I guess, varying options, I like also some worse positional props from drivers like Brad Keselowski, who's been abysmal on road courses in the next gen, to finish lower than 18.5. And I know that sounds kind of odd to have somebody of Brad's caliber to finish 19th or lower on any given Sunday, but just given his pedigree on these style tracks and just how he's been non-competitive from that sense in this current car, it seems almost like a no-brainer, but I also get the apprehensions being that he is Brad Keselowski. And to give one more option, I also am a pretty decent fan of Daniel Suarez to finish lower than 11.5, so 12th or lower from that team. I get it. He's a playoff driver. He had a really great first round, but this round has not been as kind to that number 99 team. And I know he has had success on these style tracks in the next gen, but I just think that this is a driver that's going to have to prove his worth in a big pressure situation in an elimination race for me to have any confidence to bet him for the over going forward for a prop like this. So I think they might fumble the bag a bit and finish outside that top 12, but I very well could be wrong. But just to kind of defer from the 4 drivers that I've been very confident in this entire show, I'll go with worse positional props from Keselowski and Daniel Suarez.
Not only do I like that because you're picking better for 4 playoff drivers, I'm a little surprised that you did not use Ryan Blaney better than 16.5. I think that's criminal. I mean, it's crazy to think for a guy that's racing for his playoff life, that has a win here and has had at one point 4 straight top 10s here, that you can get Ryan Blaney to finish in the top 16. I would be adding that to those 4 drivers. Again, my mind and my eyes go directly to the playoff drivers that are points racing. So I like your 4 drivers. That's the only name I would pretty much add to that. Looking at some head-to-head stacks, though, Cole, because you can parlay those not only with each other, but you can parlay them with head-to-head driver matchups. And there's a few pretty good ones this week because you've got several matchups that some of them are a spread where it might be, Alex Bowman has to finish 4 positions in front of Austin Cindric, for example. But there's a few drivers here that we have not discussed that I think factor into the decision-making with the head-to-head bets.
Yeah, there's a few head-to-heads I actually like for this weekend, beginning with Logano over Denny Hamlin. And this one might sound a bit weird, just given that Denny Hamlin is a favorite for the championship this year. But I think what we've seen since the next gen has been introduced is that Denny Hamlin has failed to find any sort of rhythm and success on these style tracks. It's been the last frontier, I would say, that he has yet to conquer in this current car. And, I mean, he has a pretty decent buffer in the point standings, but this could be a race where we see Denny Hamlin get knocked out of the playoffs. And I'm not ready to say that just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen. And For the sake of this matchup, well, I'm not getting a little bit off track there. For the sake of this matchup, I think it's no-brainer to have Logano over Hamlin, given his success at the Roval in 6 starts with those 5 top 10s. So give me that all day. Another one that I'm very high on is Alex Bowman, better than 4 positions over Austin Cindric. Cindric is a great road course racer, and even more so than Alex Bowman if you look at the his entire scope of his resume. But he has failed to convert a top 10 at the Roval in his career so far. And Alex Bowman has proven to be money in the bank every single weekend in the playoffs. And he's, again, 5 for 5 in terms of top 10s at this track in his career. So that one, again, is a no-brainer for me. I also just mentioned my disdain for Brad Keselowski on this track and the road courses in general in the next gen. So for that, I like Bubba Wallace over 3 spots better than Keselowski for this weekend. And finally, I'm a big fan of Chase Elliott, better than 4 spots over Michael McDowell. That one could be a bit trickier to hit, only because, obviously, Michael McDowell is a renowned road course racer, but so is Chase Elliott. He's a 7-time winner on these tracks in the Cup Series. He's a 2-time winner at the Roval, and Michael McDowell has yet to score a top 10 finish at the Roval, and he has yet to finish better than, I think, 27th in the next gen at this track. So I like that one a lot as well, but just given the maybe uncertainty between certain matchups like Elliott versus McDowell, I did a $15 proposal for this one. Going full throttle, you get a $150 payout. If you do the safety car insurance feature, because of matchups like Elliott versus McDowell, you would get $75 back if you hit all 4 legs. And if you miss one of those legs, you get $22.50 back, so just about $750 in return. But feeling pretty good about those matchups as well.
I agree. And listen, we talked about how we had really good success at a super speedway last week. We have had awesome success historically in 5 years of doing the show at road courses, including the Roval, so keep that in mind as well. Also, just in case you do happen to be a new listener, I know we kind of used a lot of these terms pretty loosely or casually, but Grid Rival. What is Grid Rival? Grid Rival is a great app that is completely optimized for motorsports betting. NASCAR, IndyCar, F1, great friends of ours here at the Money Stop, and we look at all these different props. Like, you're not getting better or worse props on DraftKings. You're not getting head-to-head parlays to the detail that you are on Grid Rival on those other websites. And so all you got to do is download Grid Rival if it's available, obviously, in your state, and you can use this app. You can parlay all of these different types of bets together. It's just a very intuitive and very flexible app you can use if you know your stuff when it comes to racing like we do. So on that note, here is our recommended daily fantasy lineup that we put together on Grid Rival. Different values, obviously, from some place like DraftKings, where here the budgets go by the millions for the drivers. So we mentioned the good values throughout the show, Cole, but looking at our recommended DFS lineup prior to knowing the starting lineup, what does it look like here?
All right, we're going to head this thing off with 3 Hendrick Motorsports drivers. I think that this is the stable that's going to be the team to beat at the Roval. This kicks off with Chase Elliott at $19.5 million, followed by his teammates William Byron and Alex Bowman, both valued at $18.9 million. Then you've got Joey Logano at $15.5 million, and it's all rounded out with 2 value picks in Ryan Preece at $15 million and Michael McDowell at $12 million. And how I went about creating this lineup was I went right to Joey Logano at $15.5 million. I think that's a really, really great value to have at the middle of your lineup for somebody who's finished top 10 here in 5 of 6 starts, and his only outlier being one where he led over 20 laps and started from the pole. I think from there, what I did was I went to Alex Bowman because he was right above Joey Logano just about, and I am a big fan of numbers for the Roval. It's a very unpredictable track, and for drivers that have proven success here on an annual basis, I think that's going to be very valuable when making any sort of prop bet or building any sort of lineup. So when you have somebody like Alex Bowman who's finished top 10 here in every single start he's made, that screams lock to me. And from there, I kind of had to work from the back up because, again, it was a very difficult week to build a lineup with the lineup so top-heavy, or with the values so top-heavy. And while I would have liked to have Christopher Bell as my ace in the hole, because I think he's going to have an awesome race this weekend at the Roval, I think the next best option for me was going to be Chase Elliott at $19.5 million. And we could have went with Kyle Larson, who we actually did not highlight on this show. But looking at his stats overall and just thinking about this team's sort of boomer bust inconsistencies throughout the entire season, I felt better about Chase Elliott having a pretty big race here, and one where he needs to have a big points day and have a quality finish in order to make it into the next round. And for somebody who's a two-time winner at this track before, so he was our ace for this weekend. And then I liked Ryan Preece and Michael McDowell quite a bit because Michael McDowell was the 29th most expensive in DFS at $12 million. For somebody who is a road course ace, I think that's almost a no-brainer to have as your back marker for this lineup. And for Ryan Preece, I mentioned that 5-race stretch prior to Talladega where he had a 12.4 average finish. I think that's a really, really enticing number to sink your teeth into, especially considering when you think about this driver finished top 10 at the last road course we raced at in Watkins Glen. So for all those reasons, I really, really like this lineup composed of Chase Elliott, William Byron, Alex Bowman, Joey Logano, Ryan Preece, and Michael McDowell. 3 Chevys and 3 Fords.
I love that. I love when it's all drivers we mention because that just makes the confidence level feel really, really high. So let's do it. Let's go to the Roval round of 12 finale. We're going to have 8 drivers left in the playoffs after this one. Let's drop the jack here. As any good money stop ends, we drop the jack by putting our money where our mouth is. We're going to give our race winner and race sleeper picks. Last week, you came so close to picking the winner in William Byron, your gut call, and you picked first. He finished third. I'm going to pick him to finish first this week. I'm going with William Byron. Here's what I'll say. I think that, William Byron, obviously, in having the run he did last week, he locked himself into the next round on points. You don't really ever see that happen in this format of the playoffs. That puts in perspective how good this team is running, how well William Byron is running right now. And I think there's going to be a lot more desperate drivers in the field, but I just think that the pressure doesn't even matter. Like, even if William Byron wasn't locked in, I would still think he's going to win this race. I just think that they're in such a good groove right now. It's coming so easily to them that, especially going to a track that's going to cater into what's been their wheelhouse with Hendrick Motorsports in the 24 team. I feel strongly that William Byron is going to win this race. Even though he has less to race for, he's still racing for some bonus points. There's one more round worth of bonus points to be had if he can win some stages and potentially win this race. That there's some incentive to be sure, especially knowing what the road lies ahead in 3 races where you have almost an entirely clean slate. I would say that if it's not William Byron, it is going to be one of those drivers that needs a Hail Mary. It's going to be somebody like a Austin Cindric or somebody like a Chase Elliott or a Ryan Blaney. And those are 2 guys that don't need necessarily a Hail Mary, but drivers that are not locked in, that are on the bubble. I think that if it's not Willie B, it's going to be one of those guys. So long-winded way to say I'm picking William Byron for the win this week.
Excellent choice in William Byron. I mentioned it earlier in the show. I said I would be surprised if it was not William Byron or Christopher Bell who wins this race, so we're on the same page there. And I'm happy you picked William Byron because my pick was going to be Christopher Bell anyway. I just love what I've seen from this team this postseason. He has been the hottest driver by far and away, next to Alex Bowman, I would argue, obviously. But he's a winner here at the Roval before. I think it's about time he gets a win in the playoffs to kickstart that championship 4 run. And that's going to begin with a win at the Roval. And for my sleeper, I've sung his praises the entire show. I love what I've seen from this driver at the Roval in his career with those 5 top 10s and 6 starts. It's got to be Joey Logano. And again, I mentioned it earlier as well. I think this team is at their best with their backs against the wall. They are minus 13 going into an elimination race where this team has executed on an annual basis. I love Joey Logano as a sleeper pick for this weekend. I love his plus 3,500 value for the race win. I am a massive fan of his positional top 10 finisher prop at plus 100, and I'm a big fan of him as a sleeper for this weekend at the Roval.
So true. Minus 13. I think they've got so much to race for, and it's a great pick, and I can't believe he's valued that far. I'm going to go with his teammate. I can't believe Ryan Blaney is outside the top 15 in odds. This was a pretty easy week for sleeper picks. The criteria we use is outside the top 15 by the odds makers, and Ryan Blaney is well outside the top 15 on BetMGM, and he's just outside of it on DraftKings. So I'll take Ryan Blaney as my sleeper. Another guy that, he's plus 25 to the good. You should feel pretty comfortable with that, but listen, there's only 2 drivers separating him and the bubble, and he was a lot more comfortable before finishing 39th last week. So I like where we stand. We've got Byron and Blaney for me. We've got Bell and Logano for you. That'll do it this week. We will officially drop the jack on this week's edition of the Money Stop. And when you hear from us next, it'll be the round of 8. We got Vegas, Homestead, and Martinsville on deck. There will be 4 races left once October 13th comes to an end. But that'll do it here on the Money Stop. For Cole, I'm Steven. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you have anything you want us to answer after, practice, qualifying, anything like that, get us on social media at @the_Money Stop. We're always available. We're always engaged. We're always, adapting our strategies. But we like to do these episodes before the weekend starts because there's money to be made based on where the books open up on some of these drivers. So that will do it, though. We look to hear from you on social media next. For Cole, I'm Steven. We'll see you next week. Gotta make 'em wanna come back for more.